Unsubscribe from me right now if you don't want the real fools. Let's go.
All of Africa was more or less on the side of South Africa. You know, given this whole thing, right? I guess Julius Malema, and he's in it with the Patriotic Alliance. And so all of a sudden he's off in jail. The Patriotic Alliance is now able to run rampant. And they're running roughshod over the whole of South Africa over there. It's crazy because now you went from America threatening South Africa, Elon Musk at Trump's right-hand side, to then people now sympathizing with the black South Africans. The black South Africans calling out Israel, trying to take them to the ICC, all of this. And in the global south and on the left, and anything that isn't really right, and even on the woke right, people were supporting that, even though the people on the woke right would be against the South African government by default because it's a racialist issue. But as far as an internationalist issue, South Africa was basically leading, or one of the leading voices when it came to that whole thing. And people were trying to get behind South Africa when it came to this, right? South Africa had a place in BRICS, still does. And people were just thinking, okay, boom, you speak for Africa in a way that is half serious. So we can get with you now. Ramaphosa, he goes over to the White House. He's sitting down in the Oval Office with Donald J. Trump. Donald J. Trump is sitting there giving him verbal. We know what happened there. Okay. Now everybody's sitting there sympathizing with South Africa. And it's crazy because now everybody hates South Africans. Just like that, the whole continent of Africa was coalescing together behind this revolutionary fervor that seemed to be influencing the youth. It's a millennial-led fervor, but that's been wholly embraced by Gen Z. And then you had this alternative type of movement that is now leaning more to the right wings of the respective Western countries that we see. They're kind of pushing against the left, right? You see FBA with MAGA, you see supposedly the Patriotic Alliance, these Dudula people being funded by companies. Well, I mean, there are many gangs involved in funding them, supposedly, allegedly. And then, of course, you got Value Max Limited, and they're funding them too. And Value Max, if you look at its board of directors, if you go and just Google them, South Africa, Value Max, you'll see a whole bunch of white faces show up. And then it's kind of like, okay, boom, so this is what we're dealing with now. We're dealing with a Eurocentric, capitalistic, highly syndicate-like or syndicatist movement. And it's got nothing to do with the grassroots. It has nothing to do with the people. These are elite people, these are gangs. So you have elites on one side, you have gangs on the other side. And then you got the people on the grassroots level. That was Malema's people. Now, people can say that he was rubbing shoulders with this and that, but his followers are grassroots. It's organic. It's from the ground up. It's not no random injections of cash coming from these shady little places here and there. And this is now what has now led to the xenophobia being fueled, being led by the Patriotic Alliance, which has now led to South Africa's black population stock falling precipitously in Africa. They went from being the ones around whom, apart from Ibrahim Traoré and the AES, Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali, the ones around whom other people could rally, right? You have the AES cause in the Sahel in West Africa, and then you have the South African cause. Those were the two major points of contention. There were some others, there's Congo, there's Sudan, but ultimately those are the two ones. Those are the two polarizing ones. And it's a question of white and black. I mean, literally, right? So you got the whites who are supporting the genocide narrative that white people are being taken out of here, they're being targeted by blacks, even though the statistics don't support that. And then, of course, you have the blacks who are basically pushing up against that. They're pushing back against that. And then, of course, you got the people who are basically against Russia. I mean, it gets really complicated because you got people on the right who are against Russia, people on the left who are against Russia, people on the right who are for Russia, people on the left who are for Russia. So it gets twisted. However, you got people who are against Russia, who are definitely pro-Western, and they're against the AES because the AES is doing business with Russia, right? So between all of that and this axis, this BRICS-led axis, if you will, South Africa had a prominent place in the hearts of many Africans as to how they conceived of their place in world politics and geopolitics. South Africa was their spokesperson, right? And just overnight, South Africa has now turned itself into a pariah in Africa. And everybody, and I do mean everybody, despises the South African blacks now. You can talk about xenophobia all you want, or anti-xenophobia, or no xenophobia, but it's the question of timing. Malema goes to jail, all of this begins to happen, and all of these concerted attacks on all of these causes célèbres that are throughout, the continent. The attack recently on Mali. You got all of this coordination together. And you have to ask yourself, is this by design? Well, of course it is by design. Fool. Have you not been listening? Have you not been paying attention? South Africa has now turned itself into a pariah. And this means that they can be isolated. They can be put to the side. Whatever happens down there, I've seen comments, people saying, yo, leave them to it. Leave them to it. Whatever happens to them at this point. The South Africans. You see, you have to understand, right? When you're dealing with these types of psyops, psychological operations, it's kind of like a con. You talk about the long con, being able to con somebody, being able to take their money. Now, of course, you can cheat an honest person by tricking them into buying something they buy. You don't deliver the product, you take their money, you cut and you run. Of course, you can do that. However, when you talk about the long cons, the cons that take time to build up, you need these big convincers in order to sell the mark on what's about to happen. And the mark thinks that he's about to get a sweet deal, a deal too good to be true, a deal that he knows he's got no business trying to get. You understand what I'm talking about? This situation is what will draw him further in and allow him to become more prone and vulnerable to the attack of the conman, who has now inspired him with confidence. And then the guy with the confidence is now going to make the mistake of trusting the conman. But had this man been an honest man, not tried to cut corners and do all of this other stuff, he wouldn't have been conned. He would have done things the proper way, and he wouldn't have been conned. Now, there's a very simplistic view, but South Africa is a similar thing. They have obviously been conned. They've been isolated, just like that. It's a psyop. They've been isolated. Same thing with the Black Americans. They're isolating themselves, the FBAs. And they think this is what they want. Cool. Let it be what it be. It's none of my business, but look at it. Because now at this point, you have to look at it like this. If they've been conned by this idea of nationalism to the chagrin of the other black groups out there, then what are you really talking about? You're talking about them being conned, them falling for the okie doke and them going for it. But had they been honest people, that is those who have fallen for this, because not all black Americans are involved in the xenophobic assault on Africans. West Africans are the ones who are being targeted by everybody, and this is, of course, escaping nobody's notice here. West Africa is the one that is doing revolution. Because even if other countries are not part of the AES and they're not necessarily doing revolution, you have an opposition movement in all of these countries. In Benin led by Kemi Seba. In Togo, you have opposition movement, even though Togo is kind of being more amenable to the AES. And so is Ghana. You have opposition movement in Ivory Coast. So you have opposition movement all around the place. You have an opposition movement, right? So these opposition movements are, just because they're not in power and they're not ruling right now, that doesn't mean that they don't exist. They're there. It's a sizable chunk of the population that's sympathized with what's happening in the AES. And these people are ultimately the ones that are kind of being targeted. But then at the same time, Nigeria is being used against them. So this is a game that's been played. There is a play that's being run. And the play that's being run is basically to divide West Africa and to divide Africa. Divide Africa against West Africa and West Africa against themselves. It's crazy. And then the beachheads, Nigeria, been captured. South Africa government, been captured. South Africa people, captured. FBA, captured. You can be proud of where you come from without all of the other stuff. I mean, the other day I was listening to a live stream, and the live stream was basically somebody talking about West Indians and white people and white Americans, and somehow you had people coming in talking about Africans. Africans living in their mind rent-free. It amazed me. It amazed me. I'm like, Africans are living in your head rent-free at this point. 2 hours of live streaming, nobody mentioned Africa. You show up and boom, just out of your mouth, Africa. People are obsessed with West Africa because West Africa is actually out here setting a pattern. Nobody's doing what West Africa is doing. Nobody is fighting this thing like West Africans. No one. And nobody's been to war over this thing. Not in America, not in South Africa. The only people who have been to war over this thing are in West Africa and going back all the way to the early 2000s. So we can talk about that. However, this division in West Africa is being fostered. And then the division in the continent is being fostered. Ideological division, geopolitical, geosocial, social political. This is being fostered. South Africans have alienated themselves, they've alienated others. Check this out, right? There is disharmony and there is dissonance. There is a disconnect now taking place at a time when everybody was ganging up together, supporting Ibrahim Traore supporting South Africa and its stance as far as the ICC, as far as Israel, as far as standing up to Trump over the issue of so-called, deletion of white farmers, which has no basis in reality, right? These talking points, there was consensus there, and it was reaching a critical mass. And just like that, overnight, it's all been broken apart. Overnight. Nobody trusts anybody. Everybody's looking at each other sideways. And you got FBA getting involved in African affairs, trying to fuel the flames. It's like, at this point, of course, I won't call them agents. They're not direct agents, they're indirect agents. Because again, these are corrupt people, morally, spiritually corrupt people. I'm talking about, the abusive ones. Just like the abusive South Africans, they're corrupt people. Just like the corrupt person who allows himself to be conned. The corrupt individuals of these groups allow themselves to be conned by this proposition of nationalism or ultra-nationalism or xenophobia. But the fact is, it needed to happen as well, because we need to be able to draw people out. So just like with the guy who's being conned, you need to see who's honest amongst you. If you could fall for that con, that means you're dishonest, and you were always dishonest, and you just manifested that to your own detriment and to your own ruin. And you ain't dragging the rest of us down. That's what that would be. Right now what we're seeing is the only people that have actually reached for this xenophobia and all of this other stuff, who have reached upon this proposition, are the people that already had that kind of hatred in their heart to begin with. People that were already morally and spiritually corrupt. And those are the people that have now fallen for the okie doke of this ultranationalism and this xenophobia. Now, by all means, respect your borders if you can enforce them. But don't be sitting there operating double standards, pretending that you're out here standing up for something, whilst being funded by the very same people you claim to be fighting against, whilst fighting against the very same people you claim to have been allied with, or you claim to have helped, or you claim to have done stuff for. Because everybody's in the black community is always trying to turn around and then claim that they helped the other black person. Or this country, Nigeria, helped Ghana, Ghana helped Nigeria, Nigeria helped South Africa, South Africa helped, or they built this and they built that in South Africa for the whites to allow the blacks to come in and blah, blah, blah. The black Americans always trying to claim that they made it everything possible in order for you to come in here. We softened the blow, blah, blah, blah. Everybody's always trying to claim that they did something magnanimous for the other, right? Trying to play big brother, trying to little bro people. And the truth is, you ain't done nothing even for yourselves to be even talking. Because you're still struggling to this day. That's why you're screaming. That's why you're screaming. You're talking about this, you're talking about that, you're talking about reparations, you're talking about everything else under the sun because you haven't got anything. And it's the same situation all across the black world. I don't like the term black community, I like the term black world. Because there is no black community, that doesn't exist. But the black world does exist. Conceivably, I like to call it the Atlantic world. The Atlantic world, which really should only just include West Africa, Central Africa, South America, the West Indies, and the USA, and of course the blacks in France and Great Britain. Yeah, that's it. I don't really believe that anybody else should be involved in that kind of definition, but that's neither here nor there. But I'm talking about the black world. It definitely does exist, and the Atlantic world, which is within the black world. And there's this desire to be the leader. There's this messiah complex amongst black people. And it really goes down to self, right? I'm the leader, but in order for me to be the leader, my people need to be the leader. In order for my people to be the leader, well, my race needs to be the leader, right? So like, well, black people, we're great. Okay, cool, but black insert group, they're great. Okay, no, well, within that, people from this town are great. Well, within that, well, I'm great. That kind of filtration all the way down to self. Because ultimately it's solipsism that makes people react. It's just a desire. It's to feed the self. Do you understand what I'm talking about? I don't want to be too long, but I'm just saying that South Africa, just watching the entire situation go down, it's crazy. South Africa's just lost so much goodwill over, like literally overnight. And then they don't even care. Some of them, they have no self-awareness there. It's like FBA, 10 toes on this thing. You're going to continue to do it. Everyone is so divided now. You got the Ghanaians trying to kick out the Nigerians. Nigerians trying to kick out the Ghanaians. Soon you'll have the Kenyans trying to kick out the Nigerians. You got the black Americans talking about the tethers. You got the South African people talking about Amakwere Kwere. You got the Zulu talking about the Xhosa people. It's crazy. It's crazy, man. Bravo to the white man, I guess. Bravo. But of course, We can't let that win. We can't let that ride. But it just needs to be said. It just needs to be said, bro. It's so crazy how quickly everything can turn on a dime. Like, share, subscribe.